Welcome everybody to the January 21st, 2025 meeting of the Norton Planning Board. Again, this is a hybrid public meeting, so members of the public are welcome to participate in person or remotely. In person, we are at the Norton Town Hall in the Crane Room at 72 East Main Street. For those looking to join online via video, the Zoom link is available in the meeting agenda, or you can join using Zoom app meeting ID 638-929-1060. There is also a phone number should you wish to dial in direct by phone. The meeting will also be available on Norton Cable Access and the Norton Media Center's YouTube page after the end of the meeting. For future meetings, please feel free to questions to the board ahead of the meeting to Brian Carmichael, town staff. They can be entered into the record, shared with the members, etc. if you are not able to attend. So with that out of the way, I'll call the meeting to order here. In terms of planning board business and policies, I do want to note that there was a request with our meeting agenda for the board to try and find an alternative time to meet with Mr. Bobrovsky, who's been working on the zoning recodification. We didn't get enough quorum of response for a potential meeting on the 23rd of this week. So when we get to a little bit later in the agenda, we do have some available dates for him. When the agenda was posted, he talked with Paul and said he has like an hour workshop to go through, and he felt like having that after the MBTA, everybody would be worn down and it wouldn't be as effective. So I think the idea being that we can try and focus on one this evening and move forward with that. So when we get to that point in the discussion, I'll go through the dates that we have from him. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. In terms of bills and warrants, I don't think we have anything to pass around right now. We do have a number of minutes that we had said last meeting that we're going to look to approve in batches. I want to make sure that everybody's had the opportunity to read those first few. If we feel like we want to delay one more meeting, I think that's okay. But otherwise, I look for a motion to start approving those.
A question. So, was it the furthest away, or was it the most recent meetings?
I believe I was going to go sequentially from the oldest.
Okay.
That was my intention. If it wasn't communicated and people did the opposite, then that's on me. Do we feel comfortable moving ahead, or do we want to wait?
I'm ready.
Okay. Okay.
Is there anybody else?
So I think absent further discussion, we'll move ahead. Again, just a reminder for anybody joining online via Zoom, we ask that you please mute your line. And while you're not speaking, if you'd like to participate, please raise your virtual hand in the meeting and we'll be happy to call on you. Thank you. So the oldest sets of minutes that were included were from December the 12th of 23. Again, these are minutes that Brian has finally caught up on now that the staffing situation at Town Hall is kind of resolved. So that is the oldest one. Additional comments, motions?
Motion to approve the planning board minutes of December 12th, 2023.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention. Okay. Next set is from December the 19th, same year.
Motion to approve the minutes of December 19th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Laura, a second from Eric. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
One.
One abstention from Rob, thank you. Okay. And then again, sequentially, the next ones would be, I believe, January the 9th.
4th.
There's one from the 4th, am I missing that?
It's the joint planning board ZBA. It's the recodification.
Oh, down at the bottom of the row there?
Depends on how you sort it, sure.
Good point. Oh, there we go, I see it, thank you. So January the 4th, 2024.
Motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Thank you, Laura and Eric. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
2 abstentions from Jim and from Rob. Okay, now on to the 9th, right?
January 9th?
Yes.
I don't think I reviewed those.
Okay.
I think what I did was took all of the planning board ZBA ones next.
Okay. Do other people feel comfortable moving on the 9th, or do we want to wait? And maybe I can export these into a spreadsheet, since I love spreadsheets. Okay,
Go nuts.
okay, well, we've gotten 3. We'll continue to make progress over the next couple of months here. Moving on, next item on our agenda is an approval not required for A&R-10 for 194 Taunton Avenue. The owner applicant is Lovis and Ferreira. Paul, do you know if the applicant is here or if they're virtually? Okay,
Peter Lavoy is here.
thank you.
I'm going to share this up on the screen so everyone can see it.
Thank you, Paul.
Good evening. My name is Peter Lavoy. I work with D&L Design Group. We're out of Milford, Mass. We're here representing Lobisa and Ferreira Construction. The lots are located at the corner of Taunton Ave and Old Taunton Ave. So going through the as-bills and for conservation and for the foundation, the decks were added onto 194, which is the closest foundation to the road. And when they put the decks on, they were too close to the property line. So we're basically here to adjust the lot line between 192 and 194 so they meet the side yard setback of 25 feet. So the change in the lots are only lot line changes. The area and the frontage for the lots will stay the same. We were able to swap the 2 parcels, A and B, the same size, so nothing changes area and frontage. And it still meets the shape factor as well.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the applicant?
It's just that one sliver in the front corner.
Yes, you can see the structure on 194. So the left or the west property line was changed, and you can see parcel A and parcel B are the same size. So we just swapped the rear of the structure to the back. So
Okay.
okay.
Any further questions? Again, this is an A&R, so the motion would be to endorse if we have nothing further.
Motion to endorse A&R 10, 194 Taunton Ave.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion from Alan and a second from Laura. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Paul, you have the plans there?
Yes.
We'll plan to, the tables are gone. We'll find a place to lay them out and sign them at the end of the meeting if that works.
That works. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Next item on our agenda is a modification to a special permit and site plan. This is for a 299 South Washington Street. And Paul, thank you for going through in your memo, kind of the process here. not sure if we have the applicant here remotely or not.
Rich Riccio is on Zoom.
Yeah, I'm online on the Zoom. Rich Riccio from Field Engineering
Thank you.
on behalf of the applicant.
Okay. And Paul, just to restate your memo, I'm sure it wasn't, you're probably gonna do it better than I will, but again, the action of the board is to review this and determine if we feel it's a minor or a major modification to the permit. If it is if we find that it is a minor modification, then we can proceed with issuing a modification to the permit. If we find that it is a major modification, then that would go through a noticing process. As of this point, there hasn't not been any noticing. And Paul, does that summarize it pretty accurately?
Very.
Okay. Mr. Riccio, if you just want to give an overview of what we're
Yes.
looking to change here?
Yeah, so the plan's on the screen. If you recall, this was last fall, we had permitted a 53,000 square foot building on this parcel known as 299 South Washington Street, adjacent to the Condyne Commerce, Norton Commerce Center. Has the prospective owners have developed their building plans. They've basically shrunk the size of the building from 53,000 to 40,000 square feet. Cut off about 96 feet from the back side of the building where the loading area was. Just helped in providing more truck maneuverability, and they just didn't need that size of a building for what they're proposing inside. So we submitted this request as a request for a minor modification. There's no changes to the impervious surface on the site. No change to the limits of work or the number of parking spaces that was previously approved. We did go before the Conservation Commission and received an amended order of conditions for the change in the plans. And we will look to the board to determine if this would be a minor modification so they can move forward with the building permit process. The prospective owners are anxious to get going out here and bring their operations, their business to Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Riccio. So again, the applicant is proposing a reduction in the building size, but keeping the same amount of impervious, and they've already gone before conservation. So any additional questions, comments?
I feel comfortable with it.
We're not here for an approval though?
Well, we can do, well, the first step is the board, we have to find that it is a minor modification or a major modification. So that's one motion. And then the second motion, which can happen, if we find it is a minor modification, we can proceed this evening if we so choose. If we find it is a major modification, then essentially we're saying this needs to be permitted and go through a whole public hearing process again.
I would struggle a little with the definition of major minor, it's just that I don't think this change is a big deal. No, I'm just not sure it's the letter of which.
Another story,
It is, yeah.
It doesn't change any of the criteria by which we'd be looking at it, so I don't see a need to redo a public hearing.
There's definitely, in how a major and minor can be interpreted, is a lot of gray area.
Okay, fair enough.
I remember I've asked for less gray area in the past, and I got legalese back.
More gray area,
Yes, exactly.
got gray area.
It's still greater than 10,000 square feet and greater than 25 parking spaces, so,
And they kept the parking spaces even though they were reduced.
yeah.
The
That was the
square
only
footage.
question I had, was the number of parking spaces being reduced commensurately, but
I'm fine with a minor modification.
I would agree it's minor.
I'll make a motion to find this a minor modification to special permit 9 and site plan 5.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to find that it is a minor modification. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of finding this a minor modification, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so that finding has been made.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes to SP9 and SPR5.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Alan and a second from Rob. Is there any further discussion to approve the changes? Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, we have a motion. All in favor of approving the changes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So that modification is approved. And Mr. Riccio, town staff will obviously be in touch with you in terms of finalizing any paperwork that you need for that.
All right, thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, again, we're going to the meat of our agenda now. We're going into our discussion. Again, this is a proposed discussion around the proposed MBTA overlay district zoning bylaw and zoning amendment. Obviously, since our last meeting, there has been a lot going on. Paul, did you just want to give a quick summary in terms of what has transpired at the state level affecting this regulation and how that affects the town's eligibility and everything else?
Yeah, I'll just summarize it here right on this chart that 2 weeks ago, the state's Supreme Judicial Court did weigh in on the Milton case, and they did find that the MBTA Communities Act was constitutional and that compliance was necessary. And they further said that the Attorney General does have the right to enforce the act, which could mean, could sue municipalities to comply. They did, at the time, the court did say, though, that the regulation or the guidelines that we were required to comply with was not adopted correctly, because they're treating them like regulations, but they were never adopted as regulations. So about a week later, the Commonwealth filed these emergency regulations that would lead to them being able to, that would lead to those becoming enforceable regulations. So they are, for all intents, enforceable now. But in doing so, they've reset the clock for us. We had a December 31st deadline, and it's now July 14th to comply with it. So tomorrow I'll be sending them a revised action plan to tell them how we're going to get there, which includes putting this on our May 19th town meeting agenda.
Okay. And is there any difference, I'm sure there are differences in terms of wording different things, but between the regulations that were adopted by the Mass Housing Agency and the emergency regulations from the state?
The only substantive one is the deadline. Everything else stays the same.
So the court
50
ruled that the...
acres, 750 units, all of it.
So the court ruled that the guidelines weren't enforceable because they didn't go through the proper process, but the state can just put in the same ones through an emergency process and everything's fine?
And they did.
That's lovely.
Can I?
Yeah, I have a question on this. Is that they filed them? Are they're filed and they're waiting to get them approved and through, or are they not, they are approved?
Well, they're not approved yet, but as they've been filed as an emergency regulation, they're in effect until it goes through their approval process.
Is that why they reset the clock?
Yes. Yeah, because the court said these aren't enforceable. So all of the ones that you...
But it
They
now
put-
gives the state a little bit more bite to it because they said it's constitutional. And the
It
Attorney
gives it a whole
General
lot
can...
more bite.
Yeah.
Because remember, when we were going through this, and a lot of other towns were saying, well, let's wait till the Milton case gets resolved because there were big constitutional issues with it. And it's been resolved.
Yeah, but the state's emergency guidelines are, because they are putting them in as emergency guidelines, they're in effect with a clock of July. Okay.
Right, let me take a look at a note. The regulations are effective immediately for 90 days, and then the state intends to make them permanent. It's what was written in the state's press release.
Okay. Before we move on, I'll ask the board, is there anything about that we want additional clarity on from Paul? Obviously, he's in regular communication with the state and their offices as part of this.
I'm gonna weigh in the direction I personally think we need to go anyways.
Can you just go a little bit closer to the mic?
So the direction I think we need to go anyways is to come to this town meeting with a plan that will comply with these, but also I want to hit the bare minimum. I want to take all this extra stuff that we're trying to add out. I'm not interested in who's recommending it. The law, which is right before me, that's what we should be following. And then if we do that, this is not our fight.
Okay,
Just look away.
okay.
They can settle it.
But on the state regulatory side, any questions about let's call it the last week and a half of whiplash from the state and court? Okay. And Paul, I'm not sure what you have next in your slide here. Are we going to reinforce the timeline of what we're looking to do
The
here?
timeline, and there's really two things tonight. One is a need to get done, and the other would really be nice to get done. But for tonight, for this and for the later amendment for the recodification, we do need to be voting to recommend this to be on the warrant. You're voting to place it on the warrant because the deadline's is actually the deadline to submit is the same date as your next meeting, so.
But it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
But it's 4 o'clock, it was time certain, so for this, we do need, and it's just placeholder language, this is not saying this is the final language. You still have months of working with the public to modify language, to ultimately get to the parcels that you'll ultimately recommend for. Right now, what I'll show you and what we went over last week was I would say the wider net. We're trying to create a safer buffer. We still haven't run this through the compliance model either, but the other thing I'm hoping to get tonight is, if you're comfortable, is to tell me what parcels to go ahead and start working on advertising and getting, and that's the official one, that's the biggest one, the biggest listing, and then you can always shrink it, you just can't add anything to it. This will also give me a chance to start reaching out to those properties and the abutters to let them know, because I really want to step up on the public outreach here. So with that, so the articles are due February 11th. Again, just placeholder language. It just says.
We want an article on this.
Yes.
We don't present anything, we just say we intend to.
Right. In a few months,
That's
you're
okay
making
to
a
say.
recommendation on the
That's
final
okay to say.
final.
I think
Yeah.
it's true.
I don't have any update to this time frame because the select board and town manager's office will finalize it after February 11th. But tonight, big role is to transmit, to place it on the warrant. But as you're going to continue on, you're going to continue to refine the parcels and the text, and then later in the process, you all will make the recommendations. So, and I'm also working to potentially have a joint meeting with you all, FinCom and the select board. So we're going to see if that's possible. Get everyone in the room together.
It's a lot of heads.
Yeah. So I just wanted to go back over the couple of the slides I went over extensively last time. And these were the two areas we focused on the most, which was Norton Glen and then Mansfield Avenue. And I don't have anything new to add here, but this was just a summary that if you went with Norton Glen, that's about 27 acres in total, all of that property owned by PRI Norton. There's 150 existing units there. If you were to just do a simple calculation of 16 units an acre to try to calculate the potential number of units, it could be 430. Again, I think that's an overestimation. But if you subtract the 150 existing units from the 430, you'd be looking at about 280 net potential new units.
And that would require raising everything that's on the property now and building to the maximum full capacity.
Correct.
Assuming that you could do that.
Right. And here, and just like with Mansfield Avenue, it gives you some opportunity to shred some acreage out of there too. But this, again, is the bigger net at this point. But Mansfield Ave, at your direction, I took out the Norton Estates, the mobile home park, and the shopping center. And it's a total of about 32 acres. And there's, it would, again, with the rough calculation of about 509 potential units, but there's 168 there. So it could potentially increase by 341, but as you recall from my very long, yes, Tim.
No, but
It's
yeah,
probably
nobody's
not gonna
gonna
ever
tear
see anywhere near
down
that.
the brand new IBEW building or the new one we just approved, or,
It was also raised that we could play hopscotch for all those little lots and take like one out every 2 or 3, and then you don't, you can't do that.
Well, it has to be contiguous up to a point,
Okay.
so, but what I was showing there was most of these lots are in single ownership, owned individually, and there's only a handful that are contiguous and owned by the same entity.
Fair enough, it wasn't my idea, just somebody did bring it
Yeah.
up in the last meeting, you guys did talk about it.
But when you combine them, Norton, Glen, and Mansfield Ave, it gets you real close to the Commonwealth requirements. It's at this point 59 acres, and we'd be over the 750. Again, that 939 it's not an, it's not an official number. I should also say, as soon as you guys give me the go-ahead on the parcels, then I can get with Serpent to have them run the compliance model. Although I think this will be fairly close because these are all small parcels. They don't have extensive wetlands, so it's probably in the ballpark. But this gives you some wiggle room if we want to try to get it closer. One thing to keep in mind too is as we were calculating it, we're looking at it at 16 units an acre to try to create a buffer with the numbers. The state comes up with 50 units times 15 to come up, 50 acres times 15 units an acre to come up with 750. So we'll never see 750 and 50 units, 50 acres, sorry. But I would focus, on the acreage if you want to cut it as close as you can.
I
And
know,
at this point, I wouldn't do that just yet. Let's see what the numbers show us, and then we can figure out what parcels can come out.
yeah, and I think, and we talked about, we may not want to be at 50.000. We may want to have
I
just,
agree with that.
Yeah. I don't know what that,
Whoever just makes you imagine 53.
Not more than 55, yeah.
okay,
yeah.
yeah.
We
So,
can, and we can
right there,
refine from there, yeah.
yeah.
Now, is it only these 2 lots? These 2 parcels?
I think that's the next slide, Paul, right?
Okay,
Is
go
the
ahead.
next slide?
Well, there
No,
was,
hold on,
there was
my
another
questions.
one that came up, which was Barrowsville, which was the fourth vote getter. I'm bringing this up just in case there's cold feet over one of the sites, one of the areas. This is down at Barrowsville. This is the former Tweeve Mill. It alone is 24 acres, and you can see that right now it's been vacant for years. It's been a mill. It's actually the Mass Military Support Foundation's been pursuing ownership of it.
If I could bring
Yeah.
up that, without any zoning change, the Mass Military Support, is it a government organization?
No, it's a nonprofit.
They can't build it there
Right.
because our
They know.
R60 doesn't have nonprofit
Right,
in the zoning code, so they
Right.
can't.
right. They would have, we've told them before, they need to extend village commercial to.
Right, it would require a zoning change to.
I'm just bringing up that that's been going on for a few years. But the site, again, is 24 acres. If you can do a calculation, multiply 24 times 16, it's 395 potential units. There's also some other properties right next to this that actually would be the very definition of what an MBTA development looks like. There are some single-family looking homes, but there's 4 units in them, and their densities are,
That one on the corner especially, yeah.
yeah. So you could bring that in if you wanted to add it. It's up to you, but this is just if you felt like one of the others is not great. I should also mention that students here would go to Solomons.
Students at Mansfield Ave and this would go to Solomon's, but
Yes,
the Glen is LG.
yes.
I'm gonna put on the table my big concern is with this. This looks to me like this would get built. The developer would be all over this and we'd get it built. It really does look to me like that, and to me, that's a push, get away from
Yeah.
it.
If I could bring up to go with that.
No,
It
you gotta
is,
counter
it
to
is
that,
one of the spots that it could get built and it doesn't have anything there yet. It is an abandoned factory, so that's kind of debatable whether it's good. But the nonprofit that's trying to get it right now, if we add nonprofit uses to this district, they'll be able to take it over without any other zoning change.
If, but we're exposing ourselves to
Well, they
getting a
would-
big population spike right there.
This site has its challenges, Rob, although it certainly could happen.
It could
The
happen.
dam, the dam needs to be repaired.
Yeah,
yeah.
I get you trying to convince me it can't.
No, I'm not trying to do that. I just want to put out there
Paul,
that
what
there's
is-
some expensive upgrades to this.
What is mass military support? What are they looking to use the property as?
So Mass Military Support Foundation, what they do is they work with typically combat veterans, and there's a lot of training. They help them start
Is
businesses.
it a residential?
No,
So it's just a training facility?
training and education. There could be some other commercial types of uses associated with it.
But if it's not residential, that would help keep down people in that spot and keep it away from adding the apartments to it.
It's all theoretical.
Right.
No, I think
Paul, what's the closest sewer to this site? How easy would it be to hook in?
not close.
Miles
Okay,
away, so.
123, I
yeah,
think.
Yeah.
And you'd have to go up
so
nowhere.
395
I don't think
units
you're
on
going
a
up.
septic is probably not feasible.
Right.
I'm trying to think where.
Right,
you're
again,
gonna
that
go
was
up.
that's just a mathematical formula. but,
Yeah,
yeah.
but,
It might
The
be easier
septic
to
would
get
be
to
a very
140
limiting-
from there, actually.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Septic would be
On
very
Power
limiting.
Street. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, as we discussed, I think last meeting, we had two clear top areas. As we decide on selecting parcels, the question is this something that we would notice as a backup? In case, for whatever reason, we go and notice these parcels and the owner of the Glen says, you know what, I'd love to redevelop, I love what this law says. As soon as this is effective, I'm putting in max capacity everywhere. We would have hot thoughts about that. So, once we choose which parcels to notice, that is our, as Paul said, the list that we can't expand from. We can cut, but that's our top list.
I'm comfortable putting all 3 locations on notice and then cutting it down as close to 50 acres going forward.
I want to finish the presentation and see what else there is.
It's pretty much the end.
So, so where do we can go?
I pitched it and then I think.
I've put Wheaton down and I think it should be on our selections, on our possibilities.
My understanding of it, and I know you don't agree with it, but my understanding is that a educational facility cannot be zoned for this
And where does it say that?
in the guidelines that are now becoming enforceable.
Okay, the guidelines, not the law, and the law is what's becoming enforceable, let's be
But
clear what they
the
are.
But
The
the
guidelines
guidelines are
are
becoming
becoming law.
regulations.
Until they've made that in writing, I think you're taking Wheaton out under, it's not there. And I actually have the law in front of me, I was going to invite you to point it out, because you want to say it's in there. Say the.
It's not in 3A.
It's
No,
not.
3A is only 3
I
paragraphs.
don't think we should be eliminating it for something we're going, oh, they might or something there. I think that you're artificially putting it out. And I think Wheaton is also one of your strongest things because it absolutely won't get built. You put it right on Wheaton Common, they aren't going to do that.
Okay.
Nobody's going to build it there. So the purpose of putting Wheaton is to avoid it being built. And I don't think we should be pulling out things like that and putting in parcels where there's some chance.
Okay.
I agree with you 100% that Wheaton would be the best option, but I think that it's clear, in my opinion, that the guidelines which are becoming the law, which is enforceable.
Show it to me.
Well, it's in the guidelines. It says,
You guys keep saying that. The guidelines are not laws.
So,
Well,
The
my
guidelines
point
just
is that
did become
guidelines are
emergency.
becoming the regulations.
Shall, when they become a law,
Rob,
we can talk.
so, as Paul said in the beginning, the state put out the emergency regulations, which are in effect immediately. So, regardless of how we feel about the state,
Do you have a copy of those regulations where it says this?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up.
Okay.
so, we
And
can,
these are
we
not
can
laws,
debate.
though. This is just something the state's suggested.
This is
It's-
now the law.
It's a binding state rule. So, we can choose to do whatever we want as a board. But we would have to understand what we understand, I think we all understand the nuance of what we're talking about here, because we've gone over it repeatedly, so.
To go along with a little bit further for Rob's argument, I am also fine with selecting Wheaton for notice and then knocking it off further on if we, like, I'm okay with that. I don't think it's gonna pass.
I think Xing it out of the conversation right now is not for this action.
Again, I think it's completely against the guideline, and I think the guideline's enforceable, but I'm fine with marking it for now and then cutting it down later.
The only problem with that is it's gonna cloud the picture.
It
And the
does,
more
it,
we cloud this picture, like, we do have a reprieve, because
right,
now the deadline's July. But if we get this, again, it goes to town vote and all the picture's so cloudy, people are gonna vote it down again. Then all of a sudden now, we've just seen that if this is, the state does have bite behind this with the Attorney General, we need, this is a second chance to get in compliance and not put us in danger.
I'm fine with it, if as a board we wanna take a vote on the Wheaton parcel, whether we wanna include it, or,
My expectation is they will take a vote on each section individually of what we want.
I
in the
agree with you
notice, so-
wholeheartedly, you
that's-
can't
we
do
don't-
it
we
because
can-
of the guidelines.
Yeah, so we can have continued debate on this.
Do you have an
When we
objection
get-
to leaving Wheaton then? We continue to have that as under considerations, so we can talk this out the rest of the night.
I think my feeling is that we should vote as a board to include each set of parcels that we want in the notice.
Agreed.
So when we come to each set, we can debate each set individually. Does that work with everybody?
Everybody to also
Yes.
then weigh as they vote, not just trying to help the state, but you have to get by our town meeting. And if you come with something that the town doesn't like, they're gonna vote you down. We're
That's
gonna
why I
eat
don't want
that
cloudy
impact.
the picture.
As, yes, Rob.
We're gonna eat that impact, and so if we have an opportunity to do this right and get it by the town, I think we should be seizing that opportunity, not trying to
So
find a way to get it built.
it has to get through town meeting and the state has to say, yes, it complies. So if we do things at town meeting that the state doesn't like, regardless of how we feel about the state, they can say, nice try, try again. So
And until
I'm gonna,
I see something in the law, if the state says, well, you comply with the law, but we don't like it, I say we fight that at that point. I'm gonna reverse my position on that point.
they're gonna probably say, thank you for submitting an article, this does not meet the requirements of the regulations, you're not in compliance. That would be what they would say.
Okay.
So, we can discuss specific parcels when we get to that point.
But let's not confuse the difference between a law and something you think might become a law, guidelines and all that.
It is the
I-
current
no, I-
law.
That's the law.
Guys, let's move on.
Let's be straight, that is the law, right here on my screen.
So let's move on. I want to make sure we do have members of other boards who are joining us in person and who are joining us remotely. I want to make sure, that as well as members of the public who are here, I want to make sure they have the opportunity to speak. So if there's anybody here in person or who's joining remotely who'd like to raise their virtual hand to speak, especially from our members of FinCom and or the Select Board who are joining us, who'd like to come up and speak, I do see you, Ms. Winston, as well. So I'm not going to set off a wrestling match to get to the podium here, but
Let's go first.
I just got a quick question. And I'm sorry, I came late. Somebody explained to me the guideline in law, I'm just going back and forth here.
so
Because I'm
I think
out of the loop on this, just
I think
to clarify.
So, to clarify, and Paul, correct me if I misspeak here, the state adopted the law and directed the state agency, I forget which acronym, to write all the regulations around it. A couple of weeks ago, a case involving the town of Milton went before the Mass Supreme Court, and the court found that the law was constitutional, the Attorney General can enforce it, but that the guidelines were not issued correctly, so that those aren't enforceable. The state then went behind its back and said, here are emergency regulations which match these completely, these are now enforceable, have fun. You have until July. So the state in the regulation designated the EOHLC to develop these guidelines as part of 3A. So the guidelines, which are now emergency regulations, are in effect, and they ask for compliance by July. In terms of the delineation between a law and the regulations, that would be, is it in the code of actual Mass General Law 3A, or is it in the regulations from the EOHLC? And the answer is the latter for the, this is what you have to do portion of it in terms of what you can consider as part of your district. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so schools are out, is that what you guys are saying?
Yes,
My
that
interpretation.
is the interpretation that we talked about at our last session a little bit, and Mr. Walsh repeated. I think that we discussed that there may be some question about whether there is land owned by some of those uses which might still qualify, but that's something that we would determine when we get to that point in the parcel selection process. So I don't see any hands raised in the Zoom meeting, so I'll ask if,
Again, I just want to be clear that Roger Marsden, 62 Power Street. The slide that you had up earlier where it said you had all of the guidelines, and then at the bottom it said regulations. So did all of the guidelines become regulations, and is that what this is?
Yes.
And these were the guidelines that we were going by before that are now regulations?
Yes.
the state found the unenforceable guidelines, copied and pasted them into emergency regulations, and now they're enforceable. Yes.
This is the document you're seeing, Roger.
Okay.
This is the emergency regulations on the state mass.gov site.
And as far as I understand, you're only voting for placeholder space in the town meeting tonight.
That is the vote that we need to make.
Right.
The question is whether we will also make parcel selection this evening. If we do, that introduces the opportunity that we might actually have a meeting where we don't discuss this law.
I find that hard to believe.
A man can dream. Ms. Winston, I know you've been trying to get up to the podium here. Did you want to have an opportunity?
Okay.
Hi, Debbie Winston, Elm Street. I'm just concerned as I sit here. The whole, what's the word I'm looking for? The whole atmosphere has changed related to this as of yesterday. So, do we know whether or not towns are still suing the state over this issue? Number one. Number two, and I agree with Rob until you see it as law, that we shouldn't take Wheaton out because the goal here is not to have them built and put more pressure on the schools and town services. And my third point is, as I sit here and as I have watched planning board meetings, it is very disheartening to see certain members sit there going like this, or rolling their head in their eyes with a colleague's remarks and legitimate comments. That's not cool. Thank you.
So to answer your question, Ms. Winston, I am not sure if other states or cities or communities are currently suing the state over this latest round. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody did. I believe in the court decision, the state did not touch whether Milton actually qualified at the level that they did, correct? They left that question unanswered.
They didn't, yeah, right, if they
So
were a
there's
rapid
still-
transit community.
So Milton will probably still have some bones to pick. I think from my perspective, to Rob, your point, and Ms. Winston, your other point, from my perspective, the state's emergency regulations are in effect, and they clearly state privately owned land used for educational institutional uses can't be used in this, for this overlay. So my perspective is that Wheaton is not eligible. We will take a vote as a board to determine what parcels we notice regardless. So that's my personal feeling.
Paul, do we know what Holden intends to do?
I don't.
Are they the one that's just ignored everything the state's done the
Yeah,
entire time?
they've just thumbed their nose at it from day one and said, we're not doing it.
Yeah, I haven't heard of any changes. I should say too, after our last meeting, I did email the state the question about Wheaton. And is it, you know, there's the campus, but then also what about off campus? My email went out the day the court issued its ruling. I haven't heard from them.
They've been busy.
Yeah, I will follow up and see. They haven't always been quick to respond, but town council has said her opinion was campus, it sure looks like it would be excluded property. If it's parcel property that Wheaton owns, that's not part of it. Her response was it's still ultimately the state's call. So as we go forward tonight, if we talk about Wheaton, we'd really like to know which parcel.
She couldn't exclude Wheaton, so she said it was the state's call. Let's put
No,
that
no,
out.
she said the campus would be an excluded property. But again, that all gets decided at the state level.
She said,
Yes, we are,
she said property that Wheaton owns that's off of campus might be eligible,
But that's
but that's off
the
campus.
state's call.
yeah.
And the
Yeah.
state would be wanting to push for something that would get developed.
Right.
Yeah, it's certainly, it's a gray area.
So I think we have somebody else. Please.
Barbara Lee, Barrow Street. I'm wondering if you are aware, I know planning board also deals with flood zones and so forth. The area you're talking about in relation to that parcel is a flood area. That river that runs through there or whatever, I'm not exactly sure what the name of it is, but we had extensive flooding this past year. As a result, people had to be evacuated from their homes in the Barrows Court, Barrow Street area, and brought down into, it was a nightmare. I can't see how this parcel would even be considered in light of the fact that it is a very definite flood zone and it's already affecting the residents there.
Yeah.
Also, I'm worried about our water sources. Maybe we need to go to the state and say, well, we have emergency issues with our water. I mean, how can we possibly make more water for this many units when we're struggling now to make sure we have enough clean water for the residents that are here? Thank you.
I don't disagree with you. I think the state would say, we don't care, make it happen. And I believe that is why I think the message from many members of the town has been, let's comply in a way that makes it as challenging as possible for the most significant impact that it could be. Which is why I think the first two parcels that we put up are ones that already have multifamily units on them. So that to get anywhere near whatever number the state wants, they would have to raise it and build something new, and the net impact would be lessened.
So,
If they did, if somebody decided to do that. We also talked about at our last session, I do see you, that none of the properties that we went through, I'm not sure if we did this level of analysis with the Barrowsville, that the building value was higher than the land value for all of those parcels. So it wasn't a case where you had a prime lot with a fixer-upper on it that you could bulldoze down and that you would see the value in redeveloping immediately. All of them had buildings on them that are more valuable than the land that they sit on, which makes it less appetizing for development, even if that were something somebody wanted to consider. Yes.
I don't know if you know this, but over 100 communities have approved this, correct, already?
I don't know the number in front of me, but I
It's
believe
over.
that's,
How many of those, the question is, how many of those communities actually submitted plans to the state, went through town meeting or the city hall or whatever it may be, they were a process, and the state came back and said, no, we're rejecting that? Do we have a number on that? Are they generally accepting them? Or is there a big,
I don't have numbers, but I know that there have been some where they've approved with conditions, and there may be some that they've rejected.
I just want
I
to
don't
get,
think it's a
are we
large
overanalyzing this where they're just gonna rubber stamp it? Or are they really pushing back and going through it and saying, no, you can't do it here, no, you can put it there? I don't know what the history is with the 100+ communities.
So I know they're going to go through this with a fine-tooth comb. Our regional planning agency has to run this compliance model that they have to submit, so the state's looking at that from a number crunching exercise.
And what agency of the state is handling this?
Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities.
Okay, thank you.
And the Attorney General.
They're not gonna rubber stamp anything with regards to this. Paul, could you explain the grants with the firefighters that's affecting the firefighter equipment? If I do, it might come out too angry.
I think that was, Paul, you can say, I think that was it was definitely alarmist, but I think it was.
It's not
The
alarmist.
state basically said, any grant program that goes out, tack this onto the end of it as a requirement. But they did say, Paul, would you continue?
Yeah, so in the guidelines that are now the regulations, it said all these grants are subject to compliance and discretionary funds, other discretionary funds. So when Milton got into their situation, the state withheld Seaport Economic Council grants, which was not one of the 12 listed. So last week, the state announced this fire safety grant that we've received for multiple years, and apparently the towns that are not compliant, well, this is where it gets confusing, because the reports went out that towns didn't get the money who were not compliant. The problem is now we're compliant until July. The governor in a Globe article I read said, no, nobody's not compliant at this point, so funding could still come. But that application clearly said now you had to be compliant with MBTA. And so that caught a lot of attention.
So Paul, with the Glen piece, they couldn't just add on units, right? Because
No.
they would have to build them to suit this. He would have to get rid of all those families, demolish, and then start from scratch all over again.
Potentially.
That's the only,
Potentially.
they couldn't add on, is what I'm
Our
saying.
zoning bylaws only permit one building per lot,
Right.
and none of those lots would be conforming enough where you could divide
I
it
just
and
wanted to make
make
sure
it
that
make sense.
Yeah.
why we chose it, because it's not a feasible spot to build on. It's very,
A lot would have to happen.
Right.
Again, I don't want to say to anybody that any of these parcels,
can't.
nothing will,
Right.
but
It's
it's
not 100%
easier to say it's less likely when there's a building on it versus vacant land.
When there's a revenue producing building on it.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I was gonna just do one more call to see if there's anybody on the Zoom meeting who wanted to speak. I did see at least one member of FinCom and one member of the Select Board. Okay. So in terms of path forward this evening, I think Paul laid out, we do need to submit placeholder, yes, we want to submit placeholder language for this article. The could is, do we want to go down the path of parcel selection this evening? So, maybe want to speak to both of those.
I think I'd prefer not. Personally, I think, I still disagree on the Wheaton thing. I think they should stay on the docket. I think we paint ourselves into a corner, take anything off. And now I would like to add this one as a backup to Wheaton.
Can you,
That was the one my previous deck. So
Can
this
you
is the
share
large
with-
apartment buildings, if, on one East Main Street, right after you go over the highway, you go about a quarter, half a mile on the right.
East Main Apartments?
Two seventy-four.
Yeah, I don't know the exact name of the development, but that
Looks like
development.
274.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd like to add that in. It's something that we
That
also.
looks like
consider.
Red Mill as well.
Yep, Red Mill as well.
Okay, so it sounds like there's question about parcel selection, at least from a final list.
But I'd just like to add that, if we could
So-
add that and keep Wheaton in the conversation until it's
So-
officially eliminated,
So-
I would be happy.
I will say that we went through a review of outputs from the workshop at the last meeting, along with a number of the other parcels. And East Main wasn't something we discussed last meeting. So I want to make sure that we do need to get to a point where parcel selection is final. So discussion is good. At some point, I would like to not introduce new parcels that we haven't discussed. So
I'd like that point to be after, not right this second.
Where
I
did this
understand.
parcel land on the
no,
open house?
Paul can check that when we go through
If
it.
we're tossing
But-
Wheaton out, we're already throwing away the results of the open house, so we don't want to ride that too hard.
We discussed Wheaton at length at our last session, and we discussed it again this evening, so I think we understand where we sit on that.
Yeah, last
So I'm
time we
not-
said it was law that it couldn't be used. Check that out, find out that was untrue. Now you're saying it's gonna become law that it can't be used.
Rob?
No, that's
It
true.
is an emergency regulation from the state that is in
I
effect.
heard
The
you.
delineation between that and 3A is irrelevant. So
Did what I said, was what I just said untrue?
I'd like you to,
Yeah,
if you'd
just
like
leave
to
it at
repeat
that.
it, then I'll ask you to, then I will give you a yes or a no.
Okay. Last time we talked about Wheaton being law, I went and found out it wasn't. Now we're saying, well, it's gonna become law, so we still don't even wanna talk about it. And I think it should remain in the conversation until such time as it is law that we can.
It is a regulation that is in effect. I find that distinction with whether it's in the text of 3A or whether it's in an enforceable regulation in the hands of the state irrelevant. So you can feel differently.
Okay.
The board can choose to vote
But then I wanna
however
put,
they want.
but I do wanna put this other parcel in and have it be in the conversation. We're not deciding on it, we're just saying we will also talk that one through and consider it.
I'm fine with considering another parcel in our discussions at our next meeting, sure. While we're on that, I do see you up at the podium. I want to say, is there any other parcels that we've gone through in the open house or that we've talked to in previous sessions beyond the Glen, Mansfield Avenue, Tweed, Wheaton, and the parcels that Rob just talked about, which is East Main Apartments? Paul, if you want to just pull up, I believe you had that in slide 5, maybe of your deck where you had those additional lots.
Sure.
I'm not sure, if I got the actual number correctly, then I'll give myself the mini pat on the back there. But I want to make sure that for a focused discussion on parcel selection, that we know the full and complete list that we're preparing to discuss.
Here we go.
So, these were the other, slide 7, I wasn't that far off. So, these were the other areas in our open house which received votes. Are there any other of these areas that we want to be, that we think there's enough interest, we want to have these in our discussion for a final parcel selection?
With the law changed, do you want to have another open house and let people vote again? Because,
The text of the law is not changed, so I don't think it's relevant.
oh, so Wheaton is still allowed to vote, because it was allowed at the time they did that.
Rob?
Yes, no,
I-
that was
I
true.
would-
You have to allow me to tell true information, even if it's inconvenient.
Oh my God.
Rob, the delineation between state emergency regulation and the text of 3A, we have to follow both. So I don't care whether it's in the regulations or in
No,
3A,
but
we have to
people-
follow it anyway.
But you,
And I think you're making everybody confused, and I
I'm
hate
not,
it.
and you're not hearing me. I think if people voted based on a different set of rules, and a lot of people did vote for Wheaton, if you're saying it's off, they should have a right to re-voting it.
If you can find distinct changes between the previous regulations and the emergency regulations, we're happy to discuss those.
Well, the fact Wheaton was allowed under the previous ones, and
They
it's not
weren't.
under the new. Yes, it was, because it wasn't law then, and you're actually making it a point now, saying, well, now it's law, so now it matters.
It is
That
a
means it didn't matter
distinction
before
without
talking.
a
Laura,
difference.
It,
no.
it
So-
did not matter before then, by the
So-
very distinction that you're harping on.
Okay, so I think we beat this horse enough, Rob.
Sure. I'd like
So-
this included also.
There
Can
was,
you specify?
East Main
East Main.
yeah, right.
Yes. So, anything else on the screen, or anything else specifically that we want to be included in our discussion about parcel selection?
Hi, this is Suhas. I actually live in Plainville. I'm trying to buy a piece of lot across from Reed and Barton. So when it says Reed and Barton, is that the big industrial area or it's the small parking area in front of it?
It's an industrial
So,
area on Elm
sir.
Street.
So, sir, I would say that that is the large parcel. If you have questions about a particular property, I'd ask you to contact during staff. This meeting is not
Yep,
the
makes
appropriate
sense.
forum.
Yep, sounds good. Yep, thank you. Just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Okay. Miss, I'm sorry I kept you waiting up there for a few minutes.
I'm sorry for what I'm about to ask. Richard Carr, Oak Street. Could I get a clarification on what town council said about Wheaton, please?
Town council said that they did not feel that the main campus would be allowed, but that other properties that Wheaton owns would be a potential gray area if they weren't like being used for example, they have a lot of land behind behind the ball fields in that area that's
I know what
empty.
you mean, I just
Yeah.
wanted to hear you say it again, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay. So, is there anything further that we want to discuss this evening if we're not going to proceed on parcel selection? My next point would be move to submit the placeholder language to town meeting and then move on.
Did we determine if we can do it in a single article versus separate?
Paul, did you get clarification?
We did, and you can do it on
One article, please.
article.
I want one article, so I don't have points of information saying, no, you have to talk about that part of the article later. Thank you. Ms. Winston, yes. If you want to speak from there, you can. I can just restate it into the record. I'm not going to make you hobble up.
Thank you. I have a question. If, because I was one of the ones who voted Wheaton, if it's not allowed, there is a point that shouldn't we be allowed to vote again? But I'm also hearing, based on what she just said, that Wheaton should still be in the mix, just not the educational piece, but the other land.
So I think so. The question from the audience was just speaking about the distinction of voting for Wheaton and whether other land would be allowed. I think we did talk about this at our last session. The feeling was that some of the other land that Wheaton owns, like behind the president's house and that kind of stuff, we felt that the people who voted for Wheaton, I think this was the feeling from people on the board, was they're voting for Wheaton as a isn't going to happen option. So we felt that the other land that Wheaton owned, because it's empty, we could see a scenario where if that big parcel, which is all one parcel, that whole thing, all the way going up to the parking lot, would be a potential thing where somebody would look at it and go, ooh, I can build student apartments. So we felt that including that may not be in the spirit of people who voted for Wheaton as a, I don't want it built, so I'm putting my dot here view. So
Well said.
that is Stephen, does that summarize how you kind of describe people voting for that parcel, I think?
If you are in support of the library square, the north campus, like the north, the athletic fields, it should be looked at as a place where the potential's there for it to develop, and you're looking at it as a good spot to build the center of town. It's not a not gonna happen option.
Right.
It has access to
I
sewer.
remember that night, I think that was the land you were promoting, but then I moved my dot because I didn't want it there.
Right. If you want an ideal single parcel at the center of town instead of a split district, that's a good spot for it, but it has potential. If you don't want it to happen, that's not the choice. If you want something split, you gotta choose from the other options.
Thank you.
What I'm trying to put on here is another ain't gonna happen option if they wanna say we isn't there. So, and that's what these means.
Did you want to add a clarifying statement, just?
Yeah, not that it really matters, but I'm not in support of Wheaton at all because I just think it's too complicated. And I'd be interested to see what town council has to say further after tonight. But it does seem pretty clear that it would be excluded as private educational land use based on the now emergency enforceable bylaw regulations.
This board can choose to do whatever it wants, including ignoring whatever rules it chooses to do, so. Yes. I just see another hand raised, I'll ask you to come up again. I gave Miss Winston a pass, but.
I know I'm late to the party, but, and I don't want to drag your meeting on any longer, but in 10 seconds, can you tell me what properties are under consideration, what plots are under consideration right now by this board?
So, right now, the Glen, so the parcels that are commonly known as the Glen, all of those are under one owner. Mansfield Avenue across from the TPC, this does not include the TPC parcel, it's all the multifamilies on the, I hate compass directions, the right side of the road as you go towards Mansfield.
Duplexes.
The duplexes and other lots in adjacent, so it also includes the IBEW building and down to Automotive Oil,
The oil company?
I think, all the way down
to
on
the
that side.
Northern Links.
Yeah, right to the Norton Links.
Okay.
It's apartment.
So, those two. We talked about Barrowsville potentially, we talked about Wheaton potentially, and we talked about East Main Apartments potentially. As of now, those are the only 5 right now that are under discussion, and
And they would all be split? None of them would be, none of them together would be the 50 acres?
Wheaton,
There's no one single 50 acre
Wheaton,
currently?
Wheaton might be, but most of the other ones are 25-ish, 20-ish.
So you would.
We could get to 50 acres, the state requirement with the Glen and Mansfield Ave and nothing else. And we can even reduce from the full set to get closer to the 50. I think, Paul, as you put up on your slide, if you put the two of those together, it's 59 acres. So there's some, once we get past the big picture parcel selection, we have the option to shrink down and cut things to get as close to the 50 as we feel comfortable. So if, probably not 50.000, in case the state decides we don't like this little bit of wetlands here, so now you're at 49.8 and you're out of compliance.
The schools also talked about the
So-
split being good, that you could offset between the different elementary schools.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Paul. That summarizes what I just kind of went through, I think, a little bit.
Zach, I have all this research on a different computer at home, the acreages of all these areas, so I'll send you those numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Paul, your presentation's in our Dropbox, correct? So it
Yes.
should be, yeah,
And the one from 2 weeks ago.
perfect. Okay. Is there anything further on this discussion? Otherwise, our next action, I think, would be to vote to put placeholder language for this one article on the ballot at town meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I'm gonna say Alan and Rob with the second. Are you okay with that, Jim?
Sure.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Rob. Alan motion, second Rob. And is there any further discussion on the motion to put forth placeholder language? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Okay. So we have placeholder language going forward, and we have our short list for a focused discussion on parcel selection at a future session. Okay. The last item on our agenda this evening is continuing discussion on the zoning recodification. Again, this was originally pitched as Mr. Bobrowski would go through another round of his workshop, but he felt that because his session would take about an hour, that after the MBTA discussion, that might be a little bit intense for everybody. So we will look to reschedule him for another date. He has availability via Zoom next week. That is Monday through Thursday, or the following week, Monday through Thursday as well. And then if we go into the week of February the 10th, I realize we already have a meeting on the 11th. The 11th is the one day that week he is not available, of course. He is available live or via Zoom on the 10th, 12th, or 13th. So, our action item this evening, again, is just to put forth placeholder language for the town meeting warrant to discuss this. And then we would set further date to go through that workshop, which he said would be about an hour, Paul?
Hour and a half.
Okay. Hour and a half, just to.
So
Not
2
sure.
hours, at least.
I didn't set the time.
Bare minimum.
Budget
I know I'm terrible at saying how long
Probably
things
gonna
are
be
gonna
th-
take.
Probably
I'm
gonna
not
be
arguing a lot, so
It's gonna be 3.
get ready.
It is gonna be.
Okay. So, we already have the 11th as our next posted meeting, and Paul, I assume we have items on the agenda for that meeting?
We do, that's not, as far as your usual, it's not a lot, but
Okay.
we have to,
There's 2 or 3 more days left for them to advertise, so it's potential that you could have another one.
yeah,
Okay.
could be another item or two, but
Okay. And has anything on the agenda for the 11th been noticed as a public hearing?
Not at this time.
that's what we're waiting on.
So there's nothing that's noticed, so in theory, could we move our meeting to another day that week? Or is that a dumb idea?
No, I think it's a smart one.
No,
I like it.
12th, right?
The days that Mr. Bobrowski is available is the 10th, 12th, and 13th.
I cannot
So
do
the,
Wednesdays.
so the day that's not Tuesday.
I
Wednesday
cannot
just
do
came off.
I can't do Wednesdays.
10th or 13th. then.
So the 10th or the 13th is an option. We can either add an additional session, have a focused discussion on the recodification, or potential shift our meeting on the 11th to another day in the week. We'll say the 10th and the 13th. Since nothing has been noticed, we do have that flexibility. Let me check my own calendar, otherwise I'm gonna get in trouble.
What time are we planning on doing it?
I don't think we have anything specific.
Yeah.
They just need time to finish.
I can start at 6.
Yeah, I think the challenge, I think we have a challenge starting before 7 from Rob, so.
If they keep your schedule.
Okay, select board has a meeting on the 13th.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
The 10th?
6.
the select board's not important, we can kick them out of this room. Just kidding, just kidding.
Let them meet in a small room.
We can be in Winnicott, really.
So, if we want to avoid conflicts with the select board, do we have objections to shifting our meeting on the 11th to February the 10th?
10th works.
10th works.
I'm good.
Paul, Brian, does that work for you too?
perfect.
Should we move it to the 10th?
Just to make sure, because that'll push our noticing guidelines for the next agenda back a day or two, right?
Not a problem.
just to make sure we put extra reminders in our own, because the town clerk's probably like, why are you doing it today? You don't have to do it until. Just to make
We'll
sure.
take care of it.
Just to make sure that they actually post it and don't wait till Friday like they might sometimes do for a Tuesday session.
Now, they're quick. We usually post them Wednesday or Thursday before a Tuesday meeting, so just to try to avoid that.
Can you tell I'm paranoid sometimes?
No,
And with reason. I've made mistakes, so.
Brian, I like it.
Okay. So, we do still need to move to submit placeholder language for the zoning recodification.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, Alan and Laura with the second. Any further discussion on submitting placeholder language? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Okay. That takes care of that. Paul, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up as we go through this process, moving forward to our town meeting? I know we've accomplished your 2 must-haves for the evening.
Right, so, probably not by the next meeting, but soon after that, we should have the final schedule for town meeting out. So that includes some big things, including, typically we have to present to the select board and FinCom, but as I mentioned earlier, we're going to try to see if we can have one big meeting, have everyone in the same, the room together, talk to each other, hear public comments together, and then it'll save some of us meeting time too, so if that can happen. But we'll have the final schedule, and I think we're still a little bit ahead of schedule, but as things go with town meeting, it accelerates real fast.
Yes. No, but I think I'll thank Mr. Marsan and Mr. Tillis and all the members of the FinCom and Select Board who joined our meetings. If for no other reason, that it'll make those other discussions quicker. And everybody will know what we talked about, why we talked about it, and it won't be just me saying it, so.
So motion to adjourn?
Hold on a second.
I was just saying, is there anything else anybody want to say in the open session? Otherwise, we do have a motion to adjourn.
Hold on.
Okay, that's why I said anything else.
No, before we get to the next recodification meeting, I sent Paul some documents for you guys to review, so you guys aren't like sidelined when the meeting comes.
I think
I looked at them.
we did get them on the 10th. I think I sent you a response.
There's probably one more, that has the whole listing of all the categories for the uses table. I cleaned up his organization because he had a miscellaneous table and another table that were, I don't know why commercial uses and the miscellaneous table didn't exist before. So I don't know why he created a new random item table.
But it's not changing what we have permitted in these zones, it's just changing the headings that they're under.
I did a separate thing of changes I also would like to recommend.
But they're separate.
But they should be considered completely separate. I want just the organization of the chart itself to be considered as one thing that's the main important item there. There's some changes, nothing overly crazy, but it might look a little clustery on the paper. It's all highlighted and color-coded. But just, take a look at the document so it's not a surprise.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Anything else? We do have a motion and a second on the floor. Okay. Before we vote, I will say a reminder that we do have the plans to sign here, so nobody leave before signing. Otherwise, we have a motion to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much, everybody.